Hello, everybody. Terry here from Weston Power. We are excited that we have a guest. We have somebody here today, Erin McClelland, and she is a candidate running for the Allegheny County Executive. So please tune in. Tell somebody else to tune in. Visit our website, www.westonpower.org. Follow us on YouTube, subscribe, follow us on Facebook, and please follow us on Instagram. So right now we're going to get into, I can introduce you to our guests, and thank you everyone for joining us. Hello, Erin.
Hey, Terry. Great to see you.
You as well. You as well. First and foremost, thank you so much for joining us. And first of all, let me just tell you a little bit about why we do, and anyone else that may not know why Weston Power does our educational community civic series, because of the importance of knowledge, of knowing the power of their vote. We want to make sure that everyone knows that yes, there is a presidential election, but in Weston Power, we strongly believe that our local elections is way more important. So again, I want to thank you for coming to our educational community civic series. We are recording, and it is live in several places. And so, Erin, if you do not have any questions, we can actually get started.
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right. So first, tell us who you are. For anyone who may not know you, tell us who are you?
Sure. My name is Erin McClelland. I was born and raised in Allegheny County, where I still live today. I actually live in the Allegheny River Valley, where I grew up in a great little mill town that still has a running steel mill. So a very working class background, very, very deep union ties. I ended up going to Pitt for my graduate or my bachelor's degree, and Adam for my master's degree in psychology. I've had 25 years working in the health and human services industry. I worked a lot in drug and alcohol recovery, did some consulting work on the opiate addiction, contributed some work with the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. And I got to spend a year under Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill and his people here in the city of Pittsburgh working on medical errors and healthcare reform. So that's just sort of the quick and dirty of my background. And I have been a county employee for the past 8 years doing process improvement and policy work for the Department of Human Services.
Oh wow, thank you. Now I did not know that you were under a president. I did not know that. Which one?
That was the White House work I did was under George Bush.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. And I read so much. I did not know that. Thank you. See, that's why I love doing these educational community civic series, because I learn something every single time. And so Erin, why county exec?
Well, I think it's well, basically, I spent 25 years in health and human services, and so much of what I do now revolves around the work that I've done for 25 years. I started out in drug and alcohol at Pittsburgh Black Action on the north side, and working with that population of people was such a learning experience. My initial caseload, I was 22 years old, fresh out of school, and my first caseload was 35 Black men that were all veterans of Vietnam. So it was a very, very challenging experience for me, but I learned so much, and I became so passionate about that issue in health and human services work and supporting some of our most impacted populations. And over the past 25 years, what I can say is that the support systems that we have for the folks that are experiencing those diagnoses have deteriorated seriously. We had a lot more services surrounding our clients back 25 years ago than we have now. Housing services, transportation, mental health, childcare. There was a lot more available to the patients that I had than there is now. I've seen a systemic deterioration. And now that I'm at the Department of Human Services, I'm in the county where we have all of these systems that I've worked with for years. I've always worked with public defenders who were representing my clients. I worked with CYS. I worked with the county jail. So I got very familiar with working with all of these departments over the past 25 years. And now that I've been in the county and I've seen this deterioration that is really happening at the federal, the state, and the local level. And it is a very big misunderstanding about how we provide these services. And they're so important, especially now, as the criminal justice reform movement is really grabbing onto the idea of intervention over incarceration. That's so important, and I firmly advocate for that. But we can't systematically break the intervention part because we don't understand it and then advocate it. You can't put the responsibility of intervention on all of this workforce, like I said, public defenders, county jail, CYF, drug and alcohol, mental health. You can't put that responsibility on that workforce and then not properly manage it, fuel it, fund it, and support it. And that's what we're seeing happen. So that's really what prompted me to run for this seat.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. You just, I think I'm echoing, and I don't know why. I don't know why I'm echoing. Um, you just said a whole lot. So I want to ask you, because you had said it's a misunderstanding. So are you saying it's a misunderstanding in various social networks, or their organizations, or so this two part, the services that is being offered in various different organizations, it is a lack of understanding within that network, and or the lack of mental health, because we have nowhere for no one to go now. And so what do you think about that, of that affect our whole state?
Sure, it's all of it. First of all, one of the things that have happened is over the past 25 years, you've seen a deterioration in the quality of care. A lot of the great activist facilities that were around back then, that were built up by activists of the drug and alcohol community, even during like the AIDS epidemic back in the 80s, Pittsburgh was cutting edge. Our Department of Human Services was cutting edge. The Pittsburgh AIDS Task Force was, at that time, the best in the country. And we were doing phenomenal work in all of those areas and the impacted populations of that time. Mm-hmm. Over the years, we've seen those processes disintegrate and move toward for-profit pill mills. In the early, or I'd say late 90s, when you started seeing more suburban people, more people with money and access to money and resources and healthcare, what happened was the industry sort of got taken over by for-profit corporations. And what you lost was that heart and soul activist mentality that I was taught when I first got into it. And now what you've seen is a deterioration in the quality of care, more for what we see in general health service, where we're more concentrated on providing service and getting paid for it than we are on providing health, on providing recovery, on providing restoration. That was where we were back then. We wanted you to live your best life. Healthcare was a program-funded process, not a service-funded process. And the more we get into reimbursing a service instead of reimbursing an outcome, we get farther and farther away from people living their best life and giving them everything that they can. And because of that process, we are seeing our addiction model that we use now move more toward harm reduction. And harm reduction is very important. That was really something that started in the 80s when we had a president, Ronald Reagan, that refused to use the word AIDS on television, that advocated a drug and alcohol policy that was just saying no. It was absolutely ridiculous. So harm reduction really came to the forefront. Today, it's still part of it, but it should not be our primary focus. We are so much better than where we were in the 80s. We can do so much more. And another thing about harm reduction is that is not going to be accepted in the criminal justice system. So when we say intervention over incarceration, and we need to do that, you have to understand that a moderation management model is not going to be accepted by a judge or a probation officer or a parole officer. So if we are constantly putting more and more of our resources, our funding, our effort, and our ideas into simple harm reduction, we are abandoning the criminal justice aspect of the recovering community. And that is going to make it more difficult on public defenders. That's going to create more mass incarceration in the county jail. That's going to make it more difficult for people to keep their children with them in CYF. So when you look at this addiction problem, and it's the number one most expensive preventable healthcare issue in our nation and has been for some time, it's also something that can just absolutely destroy families if you don't figure out how to manage it. I think we are failing in the for-profit pill mill entity that is not focused on really getting people to live their best life, simply on getting reimbursed for more and more service. And in some ways, even creating greater addicts with prescription drugs, basically shifting people. Okay, well, they're an illicit drug. Well, let's do the heavy lifting of the pharmaceutical lobby and pump them full of as many prescription drugs as we possibly can. And I really developed an aversion to that when I once saw a very young, tiny woman. I was working in a methadone clinic on Washington Boulevard, and I saw this woman who was very, very over medicated. It was right after the legislature got rid of medication caps. There was a cap to how much you could take. They got rid of that. This woman was so dosed that she got into a car, fell asleep at the wheel, and backed into a police squad car. And I mean, she could barely walk when she walked out of that clinic. And I thought, how are we helping this woman live her best life if we are medicating her into compliance? The idea of just pumping people full of prescription drugs to the point that they can't do drugs anymore because they can't function is not where we should be going. And that was something that I saw in the flesh. And I'm not saying that everybody does that, but we're just going there. And that is being included in the harm reduction model. And that worries me. So overall, it's on every level. And I think the biggest problem is we have a legislature that is full of people that run on, we want more intervention and less incarceration. We want ARD. Absolutely, we want those things. At the same time, they go to Harrisburg and they run bills that systematically break the work that we do. They are breaking confidentiality laws that I, as an activist, helped fight for. It used to be, as a counselor, you didn't have to tell anybody anything, even if you had a release. A lot of times people are encouraged or coerced to sign a release to save their life, to save their job, to not be evicted from their home, to fend off an abusive spouse. We had the power as a counselor to withhold information if we felt it wasn't in the best interest of the patient, especially when it came to probation and parole. They voted on a bill, and I'm talking about Democrats, to start to deteriorate those confidentiality protections. And I don't think it's being done for malicious reasons. They don't understand. We are losing the understanding of how massive this problem is, of all the parties and players and strategic partnerships that it takes to actually address it. And you're seeing that across the board with mass incarceration, with concerns about decriminalization. All of that goes into play where we are not understanding this system as a whole. And that alarms me a great deal in how it's affecting the entire county.
Wow, yeah. Why am I echoing? I have nothing open. There's nothing around me. I don't know why I'm echoing. I'm so sorry, Erin.
That's okay.
So I had to you said so much that I wanted to talk about. Literally, you said so much I wanted to talk about. Let's go to what can the county exec do about this? Because I want to say police reform, and with this high drug addiction abuse, with this high drug abuse, how do you reform that? What does that even look like? Number one. Now I'll ask my other question about the Allegheny County Jail. And also I want to ask you something about Schumann. But so how do you even reform that? Because earlier, a couple of minutes ago or so, you had said that, what we are doing is we are putting our problems on the wrong departments, the wrong people, the wrong offices. And you talked about our lawyers, our public defenders, how the pressure's on them as well. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Dealing with this opioid abuse, drug abuse, period. Because a very good friend of mine, Ricky Moody, worked in the mental health and drug abuse for decades. And we did a myths about street drugs. and it taught me so much. I did not, it taught a lot of us a lot. But so I want to
Yeah.
ask you, what does that even look like, Erin, to add reform in both of those areas, and what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a complete cultural change in how we're looking at this issue and how we're addressing it, how we're funding it, from top to bottom in the county jail in particular. First of all, the idea of creating a workplace that is zero harm, where we commit every day that we're not going to hurt anybody, that's usually used for workers. You see it in manufacturing, coal miners, people that do really dangerous work, linemen. They do a zero harm environment. And I'm sure you've seen a picture of a steel mill somewhere where they had a sign over an arch that said, so many days without injury. That's what that is. Well, I think when you're hurting your constituents, you are failing at every level. If we are harming people that are in the county jail, then we are failing. If we are hurting children, and we were hurting children that were in Schumann, and we were doing it for 10 years of citations, and we never heard a word from anybody in the legislature, never heard a word from the mayor, never had a word from the county exec. Nobody ever stood up and said, excuse me, we're harming children, and that is not acceptable ever on any day. It was just let go. And we've had this culture in Allegheny County where, sometimes people get hurt and it's okay. And it's wrong. There are systems and mechanisms that you can put into any organization, which I happen to be aggressively trained in, to eliminate harm. And we tell every employee, everyone, if you see an incarcerated person, a child in CYF, somebody in Schumann that is in harm's way, that you are concerned about their well-being, you are to tell your supervisor immediately. If they don't fix it, then you call me directly, and we will put a stop to this. And I don't care if my first 100 days is literally going through thousands of reports of people in instances of harm. It's worth it to do the 18-hour days so we can stop hurting people. That's number one. Zero harm has to be what we are. And we accept harm in Allegheny County. Not only is acceptable, but expected. And it's wrong. So that's one of the biggest things I want to do. But I also want to really start to address how we look at drug and alcohol and mental health in a way that fits into what the criminal justice system will expect and will accept as far as the definition of recovery. You will never see a court say to somebody who's in ARD, well, you can moderately use alcohol. That will never happen. So you can't just focus on harm reduction. That's a good tool to help save lives and avert risk. But at the end of the day, we still have to have a solid treatment philosophy if we are going to support people that find themselves in the criminal justice system.
Wow,
you had
yeah.
mentioned.
Why keep doing that? I don't know why I keep doing that. I will have to get with my tech guy. But so and I'm so glad that you brought that up, that it was going on for 10 years or so.
10 years.
And no one never talked about it, So I'm so glad you brought that up in making sure that, because you had stated that with the mayor or no one, and not this particular mayor, for say. But so I'm just glad that you educated us on that, because I never knew until the fire got hot, that it was like, what's going on up there? What's been going on? So let me ask you this. Is it a rumor or is it fact? Is Schumann Center opening back up at the end of 2023, beginning of 2024?
I don't know what they're going to do. I can tell you that I do not support outsourcing management of that facility and that service to a corporation or a private company. That is publicly funded by the state and the federal government. There is absolutely no way that I would be happy to have a private company take power away from the taxpayers, because at least right now as taxpayers, if we don't like what's going on there, we can vote somebody out. You put a private company in charge of taxpayer dollars, you take power away. We will have no control over what goes on in there, other than, doing referendums and banning certain functions. But, there's no guarantee that you'll have a jail oversight board. There's no way to know how that'll be run. So I don't know if it's opening or not, and we're going to have, my campaign will be releasing our juvenile justice platform. That I will be releasing a platform on that that's very thorough. and explains exactly what my views on a 21st century juvenile justice platform looks like. Because I may be a candidate, I may be a county worker, but I'm a mother first. And the idea, I think saving children, supporting children, and not hurting children is inarguable. That's a nonpartisan issue. That's something that we can all agree on. If we have vulnerable children and impacted children in the county system, then we owe it to them to give them as many opportunities as we can and lift them up, and for God's sake, not hurt them. So that is a big passion of mine.
And now, when did you say what I had done? Okay, so when did you say that report will be released? Because I would really like to see that, because right now it seems like all hands are tied. Like, what do we do with our youth, and where do we put our youth? Because right now a lot of our youth is out in counties that families can't get to. So I would really like to read that when you release that. That's something I would really like to.
I'm getting approval from some of the people with my campaign that are looking over those ideas and making sure that we're really happy with the product that we have, and everybody's, I wanted a lot of people's input. So I'm probably, I think we'll put it out in a couple weeks. And I want to do it sooner rather than later.
I look forward to bringing you back so we can share this with everyone, because right now I know in Allegheny County, in the city, that is the question. What is the plan for our youth? Ones that is committing crimes, or ones that may be innocent and sitting in the Allegheny County jail because there's nowhere for them to go. So right now, I'm looking forward to reading that. Now, let me ask you this. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there's a lot of options in modern evidence-based practices that don't necessarily have to involve a facility like Schumann. There are, lockdown group homes that you can use that are smaller, that you could have in different areas of the county. There's electronic monitoring. There's a lot of things we could do, but under no circumstances should we ever have a child mixed in with an adult jail population. That's unacceptable.
So let me ask you this: do you see the county exec's position ever looking into maybe building another Mayview, or building a group home or something similar to Schumann? Can you see something like that?
Like I said, I would prefer to have holding being done when we are talking about actual criminal activity with youth. I would prefer to have something smaller, more intimate, more easier to manage, and have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 of them throughout the county, as opposed to one giant facility. Now, there's an argument for both. The state funding would probably be more inclined to do a larger facility. And so that would be a conversation, and it would be a great conversation. I don't have one idea that I'm stuck on, but there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. And it's always nice to have options. There is also increasing funding for juvenile justice. So if we actually really created something that was dynamic and unique and outside the box, we could probably get state and federal funding for it to create something that is really 21st century, really advanced, and designed to give kids that are struggling in that system, in the criminal justice system, all of the wraparound services that I was used to being able to supply to my clients back in the day. I would love to get back to something where it was called wraparound because it wrapped around the individual and helped all those little pieces of the pie that were barriers to entry. And that's what we need to really be able to do is rebuild all of those services, because they just don't exist. And if you go throughout the county, especially in the hills and the valleys of the county where I live, when people say incarceration over intervention, our reaction is, okay, where do you want to send them? There's nowhere for somebody that doesn't have insurance to come to the Allegheny Valley and get recovery. And there's also no public transportation because we've got the bus route so bad. There's no way out. They're trapped. So even if they do get in trouble and they do get a judge and a prosecutor that says, yes, let's do intervention, there's no options. And when Family Services of Western Pennsylvania closed in my area, that was the last option. And again, Not one elected official stood up and said, you can't do this. We have to find a solution. And I'm frustrated with people that keep saying intervention over incarceration. And then when all of our resources are taken away, they have nothing to say. And it's hypocrisy. And it's really been frustrating to be in that industry and care so much about it and watch people use the issues we're dealing with as a talking point and a hashtag.
Yeah, yeah, wow. So let me. And what about? Can you picture a Mayview, something similar to a Mayview being built?
I'm not sure because that would probably involve a major healthcare provider to administer that. So that would be more privatized. We don't usually do state facilities like that anymore. It would be great to have something like that. It would absolutely. I just don't know if that's a possibility, but hey, I'm absolutely open to it if we can do that. But I just don't think it's going to be a possibility. UPMC has cornered the market on anything, and I don't know if that's possible.
Wow.
It would be great if we could, though.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I had read, and I'm sure you may have touched on it, but I just wanted to go into a little to further better my understanding of. I have read that you're passionate about police reform. Erin, what does that mean? Because reform is as big as the sky. Like when we say reform, it means so much. So when you say that you are passionate about police reform, what does that actually mean?
Well, for me, I am a worker advocate. I grew up in a working class family, and I am about protecting workers. Our frontline workers, they do the work. We are only as good. The service we provide is only as good as how we treat the workers that do the work. And I believe everything starts there. So I look at police reform as a worker reform. I don't believe anybody in a hospital goes to work and says, I'm going to hurt somebody today. Yet medical error is the third leading cause of death in this country. It's not because anybody goes to work and says, oh, I'm really going to hurt somebody. Nobody goes to work and says, boy, am I going to mess this up. And I don't think that police go to work saying, I think I'm going to shoot an unarmed suspect in the back today. I don't think that that's how that starts. I think it's an issue of culture. I also think when you change any workplace culture, you do it from jump. You do it at the point of hiring. You decide what competencies, what skills, and what behaviors and values you're bringing in. I think that we're missing the mark if we're waiting until after somebody is hurt or killed to address police reform. It's too late. Somebody has died. And we can't bring them back with all the police accountability in the world. But what we can do, and this is another big initiative I want to do, every borough and city police force in Allegheny County is hired through the civil service system. Civil service is antiquated. It is full of implicit bias. It is difficult to access. It favors people that have a better educational system and come from a wealthier background. It is not fair, and it is not a good way to hire our workforce. It is antiquated. The state legislature will not fix it. They will not address it, and it is broken. And it's not just police, it's case workers in CYF, it's corrections officers. We use civil service to hire government employees across our system, and it's broken, and it needs to go away. I designed the system at DHS that when we can implement it, we can leave civil service and we can use our own designed merit system with competencies and skills that we value for our workforce. I want to do the same thing across the entire county. And I want to rebuild our hiring system, and I want to decide exactly what qualities we want in officers that come in. I also want to make sure we are not hiring people that have already had issues, that have already harmed somebody unnecessarily in another department. So I want to rebuild how we hire police from jump. And I've actually talked to some borough managers and township commissioners about this, and they absolutely love the idea. They even offered, a couple of them offered to pay into it. They said, we would volunteer to participate in that program. We would give you money because it would be cheaper for the county to do the recruitment and the training for the testing process than them having to do it on their own. So we could centralize all of that and really build a completely new police culture in Allegheny County from the very beginning that creates exactly what we're looking for in a modern workforce with the modern ideas of what criminal justice truly should be.
Wow, yeah. I'm going to echo. Oh, I didn't echo. Okay, so let me ask you one last question on and
Sure.
that's an excellent, because I was just talking with somebody that so much could have been eliminated if officers did not get because they did not get shipped from here to here to here to here to here to here, because there's a
Yeah.
reason for that, so I really appreciate that. I really appreciate your answer on that. um my other one on our peace officers. Do you, and you might not want to answer this, or you want to answer it later, but do you agree that, especially in communities of Black, brown, low income, that officers should reside somewhere in there or close to those communities that they serve?
As a worker advocate, I tend to not want people to have resident, because then that shrinks your pool of availability. So you might actually not be getting the best people. So I understand exactly what your concern is, because I live in a community outside the city where we are largely policed by people from here, people that I'll have a beer with, people that I went to high school with. So I do understand exactly where you're coming from. And yes, I think that there's ways when we do the hiring that if we have a local applicant that is good, we can actually give merit status to them. And we already do that with veterans. We already do that with the Department of Aging. So we already in our civil service system have selection criteria. And that's how I would deal with it. If we have somebody that meets all the criteria and they live in the community, then they get put to the head of the list. I like that idea a lot. That's how I would do it.
Okay, thank you for that. uh, why do I Sorry about that. Couple more. I was going to go into fracking, but I think I read a lot about your opinions on fracking and wastewater. Did you want to touch on that? If not, we can go to the next question. But I wanted your opinion on wastewater sites, and can you
Yeah.
explain to us exactly what that is?
So yes, back when I ran for Congress, one of the things I ran on was the fracking that you're seeing in Allegheny County. It largely happens in areas like mine. It's not happening in Frick Park. It's happening where I live. And you have people that have well water. We don't even have a public water structure in a lot of areas here. One of my biggest gripes was when they passed the Halliburton loophole in the federal government, which basically says that gas companies don't even have to tell us what is in that water. I am aggressively looking at opportunities to sue on that basis, because I can't buy a Twinkie at a convenience store without having a full list of everything that's in there. But when I ran my wellness center and we did get people from more rural areas that had been exposed to that water, it was a nightmare to try and help them because we didn't know what they were exposed to. So then you have to spend a fortune testing them to see what's running through their bloodstream, what's coming out of their urine, and it was a nightmare to treat because you have no idea what they were exposed to. We found polystyrene in their urine, which is a byproduct of plastic. So my biggest gripe about fracking is, yes, these wastewater injection sites, that needs to stop. We are not your toilet. Our rural working class communities in Allegheny County are not a corporation's toilet bowl. And I've had enough of that because they're putting that into porous ground base that's going into our water supply. But more importantly, I want this thing where they can do this with this water. And we have no recourse to find out what's in it so we can deal with it. Maybe I can find a way for the Department of Health to deal with it if I can find a way to force disclosure in a lawsuit. So that's really how I'm looking at it. I don't think your frac fluid is a proprietary formula. I mean, this is not a spaghetti sauce we're talking about here. This is affecting real people's lives. So the notion that it's proprietary is ridiculous.
Thank you so much, because when I was talking to a couple of people, a lot of people don't know exactly what that is. So I really wanted you to explain that to us, and thank you so much for that. I think I got
Sure.
like two more questions, maybe three. My next question is, Erin, can you share or tell us something about yourself that people will be really surprised to know about yourself, to know about you?
Surprised. Well, I think most people, especially in the political arena, actually never
Not
knew what I did
political,
for a living.
not political.
Yeah. Okay, what do people know about me? I'm actually a pretty big homebody who loves to cook. That's something
Oh,
that most people would probably be surprised. I love to cook. I love to entertain. I'm very into being in my home and doing those kind of things for my friends. I love to cook for all of my friends around here. So that's really one of my favorite pastimes is I just like the time I get to be at home and make a good
okay.
meal.
Okay, well, thank you for that. My next question is, how can someone get in touch with you? Maybe they want to talk to you, Erin, or ask you questions that I did not get around to, or maybe they want
Sure.
to even go in deeper into what we were even talking about. They may want to volunteer, they may want to donate. How can someone get in touch with you?
Sure. The website is erinmcclelland.com. It's nice and easy. Our Facebook page is Erin for PA. And you can email us at Erin, ERIN, for FOR, ACE. So it's Allegheny County Executive at gmail.com.
And now, I knew I was going to have another question. Can you explain to us, should people be expecting you on tomorrow's ballot, or I'm sorry, on tomorrow's ballot? And if not, why? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, no, we're the county executive is a municipal race. It's a local government race, and those always happen in odd numbered years. So I will be on the ballot in May of 2023. Right now, you're seeing Congress, you're seeing governor, you're seeing Senate. Those are the races and some of the legislature. But next year, you'll see judges, you'll see local electeds, and you always see those in odd numbered years. So yes, I will be on in May of 23. However, all of you need to vote tomorrow. It's absolutely essential. There is no act that you can demonstrate where you say more without speaking a single word, and that's voting.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for that. And now, let me see if I have any questions. On. I don't see any questions from our audience. Before we wrap up, Erin, is there anything that you would like to say before we say good night to our audience? Is there anything that you would like to say?
The only thing I want to say is a big part of me doing this is, a lot of people out there, I'm sure you've gone to work at one point or another and you've looked at dysfunction or somebody doing something that didn't make sense. And you say, why do we do it this way? And they say, because that's the way it's always been done. And for a minute, you think, you know what, if I ran this place, this would all change. And I'm that county employee. That's exactly who I am. I'm the one that goes to work every day and says, why are we doing this? And somebody says, that's the way it's always been done. And, Terri, we're going into Thanksgiving. And I'm sure at some point or another, you tried to make a recipe that, your mom gave you, your aunt gave you, your grandma, and you messed it up a little bit. And you're like, I don't know what went wrong. And they tell you, oh, well, you didn't do this one little thing. And it's always about the details. And we will spend a lot of effort, I will, cooking my family Thanksgiving dinner and paying attention to those little details. I always put a very thick shot glass in the middle of the turkey because it heats it up from within. It cooks it more balanced. It cuts about a half hour to an hour off your cooking time. And that one little detail makes a huge difference in my turkey. We spent more time on details cooking our Thanksgiving dinner than a lot of bureaucrats do in how we do county operations. The details are largely avoided. And when you try to promote a discussion about details, it's really hard to get people to grab on. Mike Tomlin is famous for when they play well, he says we were on the details. When they play bad, he says we weren't on the details. The difference is when the Steelers aren't on the details, they lose a game. When Allegheny County is not on the details, we lose a life. And that's why I'm running for county executive.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. And so if you have nothing else to say, Erin, I want to say thank you so much for reaching out. And I'm glad you wanted to come in and educate us. I was looking at you. I was looking, okay, like maybe after November the 8th, but you was no, let's get it. So thank you so much for that. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining in. Please go to our website at www.westonpower.org. Subscribe on our YouTube channel, Weston Power underscore Terri Minor Spencer. Follow us on Facebook, yeah, because I deleted my Twitter, so we don't have Twitter no more. And on our Instagram. Erin, thank you so much. Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining.